Which Glintstone Staff is the best Glintstone Staff? I'll tell you. Hello, my fellow tarnished of sorcerous intent. Welcome, and, well, listen up, because I'm sure you found yourself going, there is a lot of Glintstone Staffs. They all boost different schools of sorceries, they all have different scaling, and some of them look much cooler than others. God, I hope the cool-looking one is also the best. Well, maybe not that last one, unless your thought process is very similar to mine. So, I will make this very, very easy for you. I will give you the definitive list of the best 5 technically most powerful spell do most damage Glintstone Staffs, and then I will give you the list of the most actually practical Glintstone Staffs, i.e. the ones that are best in normal gameplay situations that you should be using in just general Elden Ring. So let's start with the technical best. Fortunately, unlike the melee weapons, we don't have to really care about movesets or length or really anything like that. We just care about a simple stat, and that is sorcery scaling. Whichever staff has the highest number there on 80 intelligence is the winner, and it's as simple as that, really. And you might be saying, oh, but wait, well, a lot of the staffs boost various schools of sorcery by a bit, right? So that might make up for lesser scaling.
Good guess, but actually no.
Still sad to me that it doesn't actually say, well, yes, but actually no, but you get the point. Essentially, all those staffs that say they boost a specific type of sorcery don't boost it enough to out-damage these staffs with the higher, simple scaling stat at 80 intelligence. And yeah, I have looked at them all. If a staff doesn't get mentioned in this video, well then simply it's not as good as the staffs that are mentioned in this video. So you might be wondering then, why 80 intelligence? Well, for those of you that don't know, in Souls games, stats have soft caps and they have hard caps. And a hard cap is the number where every point into that stat afterwards is basically worthless. It adds so little that you are better placing that point in literally anything else, because again, it's just so tiny. So for int, for strength, for dex, for the scaling stats, that is 80. 80 is our hard cap, and if you are going for a sorcery / int build as your primary damage source, you want to be hitting 80. So that's what matters here. So first and foremost, real quickly, the 5th best pure damage Glintstone Staff is one for the early game, and you're likely already aware of it, but just to cover my bases, the Meteorite Glintstone Staff. This is in Caelid. You can get it right from the start of the game, run over there to the ruins, and pick it up off the corpse. This is an incredibly healthy and potent 2/7/2 scaling. However, as that can't get better, it will be thrashed as you enter the mid to late games, so we don't have to worry about this staff when it comes to answering the question of the day, which is the best. Then we have Azur's Glintstone Staff, located in the Raya Academy. This is an interesting one. First and foremost then, it increases your casting speed by about 8%, and in case you're wondering, the 8% cast speed is not worth both the lesser damage that this deals due to lower sorcery scaling and the 25% extra mana cost. And if you want more empirical proof on that, I just recently did a video completely breaking down cast speed, what affects it by how much and whether it's worth using, and I will link that below. It also has your spells cost 25% more for the privilege. At +10 at 80 int, we are looking at 362 scaling, which is very impressive and very potent. A Glintstone Pebble with this staff is 820 on our, I'm sure, completely willing volunteers here. Next up the totem pole then, on our scale of death dealing sticks, is the Carian Regal Scepter. The Glintstone Staff you get for trading in the remembrance of Ranella, the final boss of the Carian Academy, in the library. And this is incredibly solid. No fancy tricks, doesn't do anything for extra mana, just has a 3/7/3 scaling at our +10 and 80 int, giving us our Glintstone Pebble benchmark of 849 damage. And on top of boosting Full Moon Sorcery, and every sorcery build should at least include Ranni's Dark Moon for the 30% more magic damage taken debuff it applies to enemies, this is a really, really solid general use option, but we'll get to that more specifically later on. The only real downside is the inbuilt spinning staff Ash of War, as it limits some of your dual wield and utility options, but that can be worked around. In second place then, and you might have guessed this to be quite high up, is Lusat's Glintstone Staff, found past the twin boss in the town of Sorcery in a chest. This thing packs an absolute wallop. We are talking at plus 10 at 80 int, a grand total of 413 sorcery scaling. On top of that, it has the bonus effect of making your spells do 8% more damage for costing 50% more mana, which on the surface of it isn't a worthwhile trade, but the only reason you will ever use this staff is to do maximum damage as fast as possible, and in that situation you aren't really caring about how much FP that is costing. In any case, when it comes to our bird test, well, the numbers speak for itself. This thing is up there with 948 damage. Now you may be curious then as to, okay, I really thought that was going to be number one, what beats it? Well, there is a wild card here that, while yes, technically beats it, you'll see what I mean. It has a grand total of 430 sorcery scaling. Yes, you will quite literally become the Prince of Death, because it's his staff. This guy right here, this is the Prince of Death. He took that title a little bit too literally. Alright, enough beating about the bush, this is the full picture. It is a normal Smithstone upgraded staff, so that's a bit of a change, and of course at plus 25, with our 80 int, there we have it, 430 sorcery scaling. Now, the astutely observational amongst you might be going, hang on a minute, it also scales with Faith. It's an A in both Faith and Int, as opposed to the pure S and just Int that the other staffs have. You also have 80 Faith there, you son of a gun. And yes, you are correct. This staff, in order to be numerically the most powerful staff, requires you to also pump your Faith. But how much does it need you to pump your Faith? Well, this staff will be the most damaging staff in the game as long as your Faith is within 5 points of your intelligence. So if you're 40 int, 35 Faith, yeah, you want to use this. If you're 65 int and 60 Faith or more, you want to use this. If you are basically doing a build where Faith and int remain somewhat equivalent, Prince of Death Staff is for you. It's acquired in the Deep Root Depths and is fairly close to this Grace. You just simply run up the route, take a little detour to the left, curve round, and yeah, here he is, Mr. Prince of Death. In any case, obviously, that's not the most practical thing in the world to have, because that's one hell of a point investment for pure sorceries, which is why it wins our, technically, this is the highest damage Glintstone Staff in the game, but it ain't gonna win our practical list, which is, I'd say, arguably more important, because that is actually what's going to matter in your general gameplay situations. Alright, so, practically, as I mentioned, early game Meteorite Staff, easy. Then we quickly revisit our Prince of Death Staff. This, as I said then, is your best bet for a Faith Intelligence hybrid. But I mention it again here because in the situation where you're level like 200, 300, you're really pushing it, new game plus, new game plus, new game plus, and you have more levels than you know what to do with, and you can comfortably have your vigor, your endurance, your mind, all at the point that you need them, and you have spare levels, well then yes, pump your Faith up to the same level of your intelligence, do a double 80, and use this staff, and it just becomes the best. So in the situation where you have so many levels that getting 80 intelligence, 80 faith doesn't cripple the rest of your build, then yes, use this. Obviously, with the emerging PvP meta of level 150, and the amount of levels you will have in probably your first playthrough, and hell, even New Game Plus, this becomes not viable because you will simply not have enough points to put into other stats, especially Vigor, that you really need to operate. So, I have to mention it in those situations, but generally speaking, you're not going to be using this thing for a fair while. Then the next two are essentially joint first. These are the two clear winners, and they will be what you're using most of the time in most situations because they're simply just that good. First and foremost, for general gameplay, for generally clearing a level, clearing a dungeon, killing random enemy after random enemy, you want to be using the Carian Staff. This, not having the extra mana cost of Lusat, means that obviously your FP will last longer, allowing you to kill all of the enemies that you need to kill on your way to the boss. This is your go-to for just general use and FP to damage effectiveness. This is your bread and butter Glintstone Staff, and you will always, ideally, have it equipped in one of your hands along with Lusat's. You see, the thing is, I cannot tell you, just get this one Glintstone Staff and you're sorted, because that's essentially disingenuous. You want to have two. You want to have the Carian Regal Scepter, and then you want to have Lusat's. So you're generally progressing along, killing things, being FP efficient with the Carian Regal Scepter, and then when you need that boom, you need that damage, you need that extra scaling, which usually comes in the situation of PvP, or a boss where mana efficiency is much less important because you just need to do as much damage as fast as possible, then you switch to Lusat's and you blow things up. That is the way, especially when you combine it with the physics that give you 10 seconds of no mana cost. You need Lusat Staff in that situation because you just have infinite mana, massively damaging spam spells that just destroy everything. So essentially, if you want my recommendation, if you want the facts, if you want the result of this testing, you want to go get a +10 Carian, a +10 Lusat, have them both equipped, either in the same hand or one of each, and you use them moment to moment depending on the situation. You've got your standard, reliable Carian Scepter, and then you've got the nuclear button for when the situation calls for it in Lusat. And the only caveat to this entire system, which is just empirically the best system to employ, factually so, the numbers speak for themselves, again, unless you're like level 300 and can 80 int 85, the only exception to this rule is full moon sorceries specifically. As I said, you're always going to want Ranni's full moon. It is the better of the two, despite doing less damage, because it debuffs the enemy to take 30% more magic damage for a lengthy amount of time. And if you cast full moon sorcery, the boost to full moon that the Carian does give makes it almost deal as much damage as Lusat's, but it doesn't cost 50% more mana. And when we're talking about a sorcery that already costs like 50 FP, you really don't need that to be costing 75 instead. So, yeah, always cast full moon spells with the Regal Scepter. Everything else is a simple rule set. Do I need FP efficiency? Carian Regal Scepter. Do I need most damage as fast as possible? Lusat's. Done and done. I hope you have found this useful then. I hope it has eased your worry over to which Glintstone Staff to wield. Oh, and the one extra Glintstone Staff I'll mention, just because I think it's probably the one that will come up the most, there is a Glintstone Staff that scales with Arcane and Int, similar to the Death Staff scaling with Faith and Int, but it's nowhere near as good. I did, as I tested all of them, test it. So without further ado then, like if you've enjoyed this, subscribe for more, hit the bell for more Elden Ring tips, tricks, guides, research, funny bits, builds, you name it, coming in the future very, very soon. Please consider supporting the future of this channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.